Sarah Mills tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear, securing it with a simple plastic clip as she arranged participation forms on the registration table. The morning air at Ridgewood Range carried the sharp scent of gunpowder and ambition. All around her, competitors strutted with custom rifles worth more than her monthly rent, their equipment bags bulging with specialized gear. "Water station needs refilling," barked the event coordinator, barely glancing her way. Sarah nodded, accepting her place in the pecking order. She was just a volunteer after all, here to handle paperwork, refill water stations, and stay behind the safety lines. From her station, she overheard snippets of technical conversations about ballistic coefficients and wind compensation. The Devil's Crosswind, they called it, Ridgewood's notorious air currents that challenged even seasoned shooters. "What's your take on the new Hawthorne scope?" a bearded man in a tactical vest asked another competitor. Sarah leaned in slightly. "My uncle had one of those. Great light transmission, but the elevation turrets were a bit sticky in cold weather." The men turned, surprise flashing across their faces before settling into patronizing smiles. "Pretty complicated equipment, sweetheart," said the taller one. Marcus Blackwell, according to his name tag. Stick to the check-in sheets. His companion, an older man named Vincent Reed, chuckled. "These rifles kick harder than you think. Best to observe from behind the caution tape." Sarah pressed her lips together and nodded, retreating to her paperwork. They couldn't know about those childhood summers at her uncle's farm, plinking tin cans with his old .22 rifle. How she'd developed an uncanny sense for wind by watching tall grass bend before each shot. How she'd mastered breath control and trigger discipline before she even knew the technical terms. As the day progressed, she watched competitors fumble with their expensive equipment, cursing the unpredictable crosswinds. A middle-aged instructor named Franklin Carter caught her eye when she winced at a particularly poor shot adjustment. "You look like you want to say something," he said quietly, approaching her table. The wind shifted right before he fired, she replied. "You could see it in the flags." Franklin studied her curiously. "You shoot?" "Used to. Nothing fancy." He nodded thoughtfully, then glanced at his watch. "Lunch break soon. I've got a spare rifle that needs scope alignment checked. Could use a second pair of eyes if you're interested." For the first time that day, Sarah felt a spark of excitement. "I'd like that." Behind her, Marcus snorted. "Better stick to water. Cups. Volunteer." 3 minutes to prove herself. By midday, Sarah found herself crouched behind a simple bolt-action rifle at an unoccupied firing station. Franklin had quietly set it up, ostensibly to check the scope alignment, while the other competitors were preoccupied with lunch or their own practice sessions. "Just a few test shots," he said casually. "See if you remember the basics." The rifle wasn't the premium brand that Marcus toted around, but it was solid, a Remington 700, reliable and true. Sarah positioned herself, feeling the weight of the weapon against her shoulder. The distant target stood at 100 yards, a modest challenge by this range's standards. She inhaled slowly, remembering her uncle's steady voice. "Exhale halfway and hold. Squeeze, don't pull." The rifle cracked, and through the scope, she saw her shot land just off-center. "Not bad," Franklin remarked, watching through his spotting scope. "Adjust a bit for the crosswind coming from 3 o'clock. Sarah made the correction mentally. No fancy ballistic calculator needed. Her second shot hit closer to center. The third formed a tight group with the previous two. Franklin raised an eyebrow. "That's some natural talent you got there." "Sieht das sound sabonsti." Small cluster of onlookers had gathered, watching with mild curiosity. Vincent approached, arms crossed over his chest. "Beginner's luck," he muttered, loud enough for Sarah to hear. Before she could respond, the loudspeaker crackled. Informal mini-match starting in 5 minutes, 3-minute timed shooting challenge at moderate range, all participants welcome. Sarah bit her lip, torn between the urge to prove herself and the fear of public humiliation. Franklin seemed to read her thoughts. "Sometimes you just need 3 minutes to change someone's perception," he said softly. Heart pounding, Sarah walked to the sign-up table and wrote her name down. The volunteer handling registrations blinked in surprise but didn't object. Minutes later, she was prone on a shooting mat, staring at a silhouette target 200 yards away. Marcus spotted her and smirked. "You better stay behind the barrier for this. 1. We're about to make serious noise." Sarah didn't respond. She steadied her breathing as the coordinator's instructions rang out. 3 minutes! Shoot as many times as you wish. Best 5 hits count. Begin! The range erupted with gunfire. Sarah took her time, firing methodically. Each shot followed a careful assessment of the wind flags. By her third round, she'd adjusted perfectly for the crosswind. When the whistle blew, the scoreboard showed her grouped near the middle of the pack, a respectable showing that had the veterans murmuring in surprise. "Beginner's luck," Marcus repeated, but his voice lacked conviction. As competitors dispersed, Franklin approached with a glint in his eye. "Tomorrow's the real challenge, the 3-minute maximum distance shot. 1 bullet, 1 chance. Think you're up for it?" "They'd never let me compete in that," Sarah said. "Why not? It's open registration." Sarah glanced at Marcus and Vincent, who were watching her with newfound wariness. "Because I'm just the volunteer who hands out water cups," she replied, a hint of defiance creeping into her voice. "Perhaps," Franklin said with a smile. "It's time to change that. The mockery intensifies." Dawn broke over Ridgewood Range with Sarah's name freshly inked on the official participant list for the day's culminating challenge. She'd barely slept, her mind racing between confidence and terror. What was she thinking, putting herself against professionals who'd trained for years? Franklin met her at the practice area, a secluded corner where they could work without immediate scrutiny. "Let's see what you can do at 300 yards, he suggested, setting up the same rifle she'd used yesterday. Her first shot scattered widely. The notorious Devil's Crosswind was particularly fierce this morning. Panic rose in her throat as she struggled to find consistency. "Don't rush," Franklin advised. "Feel the wind before you commit." By mid-morning, a crowd had gathered to watch the various competitors prepare. Word had spread about the volunteer, who'd signed up for the maximum distance challenge. Most reactions ranged from amusement to outright mockery. "Heard you signed up for the big show," Marcus said, approaching with Vincent and 2 other shooters. "Gutsy move for someone who handed me a registration form yesterday. Just trying something new," Sarah replied evenly. Vincent chuckled. "This isn't tin can shooting, sweetheart. That target's nearly a half-mile out with crosswinds that'll make your head spin." "She'll be lucky if her bullet lands on the range property," one of the others added. "Maybe she should try it blindfolded," Marcus suggested with a smirk. "Might improve her chances." The group erupted in laughter. Sarah's cheeks burned, but she kept her expression neutral as she continued adjusting the rifle's scope. "Don't let them get to you," Franklin murmured when the group moved on. "They're just worried?" "About what? Me embarrassing myself?" "About you embarrassing them." As the day progressed, Sarah successfully completed the preliminary rounds. Not spectacularly, but well enough to qualify for the final challenge. Each decent shot seemed to intensify the veterans' discomfort, their whispers growing more pointed. During lunch, she overheard Marcus speaking loudly at a nearby table. "It's a fluke. Put her under real pressure and watch her crumble. The Devil's Crosswind eats amateurs for breakfast. Sarah concentrated on her sandwich, trying to ignore him when she felt someone sit beside her. A woman in her 40s with short grey hair and sharp eyes introduced herself as Diana, another competitor. "Those boys giving you grief?" she asked. Sarah shrugged. "Nothing I can't handle." "I've been competing here for years," Diana said. "Seen plenty of hotshots come and go. The wind here doesn't care about your reputation or your fancy gear." She nodded toward Marcus's table. "They're scared because you're a wild card. No expectations means no pressure." "Trust me, I feel plenty of pressure," Sarah admitted. Diana smiled. "Good. Use it. Channel it into focus." She stood to leave, then added, "By the way, that comment about shooting blindfolded? I'd take that as a compliment. Only the truly gifted can feel the wind rather than just calculate it." As Diana walked away, Sarah pondered her words. The announcement for the final challenge would come soon. 1 shot. Maximum distance. 3 minutes to take it. Could she prove them all wrong? Or was she setting herself up for the most public humiliation of her life, the blindfold challenge? The afternoon sun beat down on Ridgewood Range as competitors gathered for the culminating challenge. The target stood at an imposing distance, visible only through quality scopes, a menacing steel plate with a bright center marking that seemed impossibly small from this vantage point. Sarah positioned herself at her assigned station, trying to calm her thundering heart. Franklin gave her a reassuring nod from behind the firing line. Around her, competitors fiddled with expensive equipment, digital wind meters, ballistic calculators, custom-tuned rifles worth small fortunes. The range coordinator's voice boomed. Through a megaphone, "Competitors, you will have exactly 3 minutes to take 1 shot at the maximum distance target. No second chances. This simulates real-world pressure scenarios. Prepare your equipment." Sarah checked her borrowed rifle one last time. Simple, reliable, nothing fancy. Then Marcus's voice cut through her concentration. "Are you kidding me? You really think you can stand there with a piece of cloth over your eyes and somehow beat us?" She turned to find him standing nearby, Vincent at his shoulder. Both men wore expressions of disbelief mixed with disdain. "What are you talking about?" she asked. "Your friend Diana's been telling everyone you're going to shoot blindfolded." Marcus laughed. "Said you could feel the wind better than we can calculate it." Sarah blinked in surprise. She'd said no such thing, but the rumor had clearly spread. Several nearby competitors were watching with interest. "That's ridiculous," she said. "I never—" "Scared now?" Vincent goaded. "All that bravado gone when it's time to put up or shut up?" Something clicked in Sarah's mind. They were trying to rattle her, to break her concentration before the critical shot. But their mockery had inadvertently created an opportunity. Franklin appeared at her side. "You don't have to do anything crazy," he said quietly. "Just take your shot normally." But Sarah was already reaching into her pocket, pulling out the simple bandana she'd used earlier to wipe sweat from her forehead. "What's she doing?" Someone whispered. "No way," said another. With deliberate movements, Sarah folded the bandana into a strip. "If I'm going to be ridiculed either way," she said evenly, "I might as well earn it." She tied the cloth around her eyes, adjusting it to ensure. Complete darkness. The range fell silent. "This is insane," Marcus sputtered. "Range officer, you can't allow this." The range officer approached, concerned. "Miss, I can't let you shoot if you can't see the target. It's a safety issue." Sarah removed the blindfold. "I'll sight the target first. I'll only put this on for..." The final adjustments and the shot. After a moment's hesitation, the officer nodded. Your call, but safety protocols remain in effect. As Sarah returned to her position, she heard Franklin ask, Are you sure about this? No, she admitted. But I've spent 2 days listening to them tell me what I can't do. Maybe it's time to show them what I can. The loudspeaker crackled. Competitors to your stations. Challenge begins in 2 minutes. Sarah sighted the distant eye. Target, making initial adjustments for elevation and windage. She studied the wind flags intently, memorizing their patterns, feeling the breeze against her cheek. Then, just before the starting horn, she raised the blindfold to her eyes once more. The range fell silent as competitors and spectators alike watched in disbelief. The horn blared. 3 minutes on the clock. Sarah's world narrowed to darkness and sensation. 3 minutes of truth. Darkness enveloped Sarah as the horn signaled the start of the 3-minute challenge. With the blindfold secured, she relied entirely on her other senses. The morning's practice sessions had given her a mental image of the target's position. Now she needed to feel the wind's subtle changes. A cool breeze brushed her left cheek, stronger than moments before. The small wind flag she'd been watching had likely twisted. She made a minor adjustment, shifting her aim slightly right. What's she doing? Someone whispered, close enough for Sarah to hear. Committing career suicide, came Marcus's response. Tension evident in his voice. Sarah blocked them out, focusing on her breathing. Inhale, exhale, halfway. Hold. 1 minute had passed. Other competitors were already firing, their shots echoing across the range. Some landed with the satisfying clang of steel being struck. Others disappeared into silence. Misses. She's taking too long, Vincent muttered. Sarah felt a stronger gust, then a lull. The wind was shifting again. She adjusted once more, trusting her instincts rather than calculation. 2 minutes gone, the pressure mounted. Her finger rested lightly on the trigger, waiting for the perfect moment. Remember your hold, Franklin called softly from behind her. You can do this. Blindfold her now if she wants real drama, Marcus sneered, close enough that his voice carried to her position. Sarah. Let his words float away. She needed perfect alignment. The crosswind had settled into a rhythm she could feel against her skin, left to right, steady and predictable for the moment. 2 minutes and 40 seconds. It was now or never. She exhaled slowly, found her half-breath hold, and squeezed the trigger. The rifle bucked against her shoulder. The report echoed across the range, and then silence. Complete, deafening silence as everyone waited for the spotter's signal. 2 seconds felt like an eternity. Then a single, sharp, metallic ping rang out, followed by the spotter's flag popping. Up to confirm a direct hit. An astonished collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Bullseye confirmed! The official's voice crackled over the speakers. Sarah removed her blindfold, blinking in the sudden light. The range had fallen into stunned silence. Franklin stood nearby, his face split with a proud grin. Marcus and Vincent stared open-mouthed, their bravado evaporated. The range officer approached, checking his clipboard twice. That's a confirmed. Bullseye at maximum distance, blindfolded for the final adjustments and shot. I've never seen anything like it. Photographers snapped pictures as murmurs swept through the spectators. Some clapped hesitantly, others still appeared too shocked to react. Sarah lowered the rifle, her hands trembling with relief and lingering adrenaline. She'd done it, faced down not just the infamous Devil's Crosswind, but the doubt and derision that had followed her since she first stepped onto the range. How? Vincent finally managed, his face flushed with embarrassment. Sarah offered a small smile. When you grow up shooting tin cans with no fancy equipment, you learn to feel the wind rather than calculate it. As the final results were posted, Sarah's name appeared near the top of the scoreboard. She hadn't swept every category, but her accuracy in the decisive moment had placed her above many seasoned shooters. Marcus approached, his posture rigid. She braced for another cutting remark, but instead he extended a grudging handshake. "I
underestimated you," he admitted. "That was one hell of a shot."
Sarah accepted his handshake, relieved that at least some civility existed behind his earlier arrogance. Vincent stood back, arms crossed, lips pursed. He said nothing, but dipped his head once, a subtle acknowledgement that spoke volumes. As competitors began packing up, Sarah realized that her victory wasn't about besting others. It was about conquering her own doubts and proving that skill could emerge from the most unexpected places. Ripples of change. Word of Sarah's blindfolded bullseye spread through the shooting community like wildfire. By evening, her phone buzzed, constantly with notifications, messages from amazed spectators, inquiries from local clubs, even a few interview requests from sporting magazines. "Did you really shoot blindfolded?" texted an old friend. Sarah confirmed that yes, she had, though not because she was overconfident. It had been an impulsive response to a challenge, a dare she'd accepted to prove something both to them and to herself. 3 days later, an email arrived from Highland Shooting Club. They'd heard about her performance and wanted to invite her to a small training workshop. They hoped she might demonstrate fundamental techniques to newcomers, especially those intimidated by the competitive culture. Sarah hesitated, cursor hovering over the reply button. What if people expected her to replicate that bullseye every
time? But another voice urged her forward. There's more you can do. Maybe she could help someone else discover their hidden potential.
With a deep breath, she typed a polite acceptance, acknowledging she wasn't an expert, but would gladly share what she knew about stance, breath control, and focusing under pressure. The club representative responded enthusiastically. Your story resonates with so many who feel intimidated by the sport. Having someone who understands that perspective would be invaluable. As she prepared for the workshop, Sarah received another unexpected message from Franklin. "Proud of what you accomplished," he wrote. "But even prouder of what you're about to do. Teaching others takes more courage than any shot you'll ever take." On Saturday morning, Sarah pulled into Highland's parking lot, anxiety fluttering in her stomach. The range was smaller, less intimidating than Ridgewood. About 15 participants waited, their expressions ranging from curiosity to admiration. To her surprise, Diana stood among them, arms crossed, and a satisfied smile on her face. "You started that rumor about me shooting blindfolded," Sarah accused good-naturedly as they set up. Diana winked. "Sometimes people need a push. Those guys were trying to rattle you. I just turned it around on them." "By setting impossible expectations?" "Which you exceeded," Diana reminded her. "Some people spend their whole lives waiting for permission to excel. You just needed the right challenge." As participants gathered around, Sarah took a moment to collect her thoughts. She saw herself in their uncertain expressions, the same hesitation she'd felt standing at the registration table at Ridgewood. "I was told once to just watch," she began. "They said I didn't belong, but I realized that if we let those voices stop us from trying, we never discover our full capability." The group listened, nodding. They too had stories of discouragement or intimidation. She covered the basics: grip, sight alignment, trigger control, nothing fancy. Then she recounted the 3-minute challenge and how her heart had nearly pounded out of her chest. That raw honesty resonated with them. One young woman with a tight ponytail confided afterward that she'd almost cancelled her attendance, scared she'd embarrass herself. "Embarrassment only lasts a moment," Sarah replied gently. "Regret lasts far longer if you don't at least try." As the day concluded, participants approached with questions and thanks. Some had hit targets they'd never managed before. Others simply appreciated seeing someone who didn't fit the typical shooter stereotype succeeding. Diana sidled up as Sarah packed her gear. "Not bad for a water cup volunteer," she teased. Sarah laughed. "I'm still trying to process it all." "Well, process this," Diana said, handing her a brochure. "State championships are next month. You should enter." "That's a whole different level." "So was shooting blindfolded," Diana countered. "Sometimes the only limits that matter are the ones we place on ourselves." Driving home, Sarah felt an uplifting sense that her experience could help others. That victory at Ridgewood wasn't just a personal triumph, it was a catalyst for stirring hope in people who'd been told they didn't belong. She thought about how easily fear could have kept her behind the sign-in desk, never stepping forward to pick up a rifle. She was glad she took the risk. Return to Ridgewood. Months passed and Sarah embraced her new identity with cautious excitement. Local clubs invited her to demonstrations and informal competitions. Sometimes she declined due to work obligations, but often she agreed, continuing to refine her technique. She was careful never to overestimate her abilities. The Devil's Crosswind didn't magically become simpler just because she had once conquered it. Each event provided fresh insights into the mental discipline required to remain calm under changing conditions. Occasionally, she encountered Marcus or Vincent at larger gatherings. They were mostly polite now, engaging in small talk about equipment or sharing stories from recent tournaments. The tension had evolved into a mutual respect, if not friendship. Late one Friday afternoon, an invitation arrived for the annual Precision Challenge back at Ridgewood Range. The event had grown, with sponsors and media coverage expected. Sarah's stomach tightened as she read the email. Returning to where it all began felt symbolic, but also daunting. When she arrived at Ridgewood the following month, the transformation was striking. Vendor booths lined the entrance, a large scoreboard displayed digital results. Camera crews set up near prime shooting positions. At the registration table, Sarah was greeted by a volunteer who did a double take when checking her ID. "You're Sarah Mills, the blindfold shooter?" The young man's eyes widened. "That shot is..."
"Legendary around here." Sarah smiled politely, uncomfortable with the attention. "Just here to compete like everyone else." As she moved toward the equipment area, a familiar voice called out, "The prodigal shooter returns." Marcus approached, extending
his hand. His demeanor had softened since their last encounter. "Good to see you," she said, shaking his hand. "Heard you've been coaching newcomers," he remarked, bringing fresh blood into the sport. "Just sharing what I know, nothing fancy." Vincent joined them, nodding respectfully. "Field's gotten more diverse since your visit. More women, more youngsters, less of an old boys' club." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Is that a complaint?" "An observation," he replied. "Change isn't always comfortable, but it's usually necessary." As they talked, Sarah spotted Franklin across the range, instructing a group of young shooters. He caught her eye and smiled broadly. "Your mentor's become something of a talent scout," Marcus explained. "Keeps telling people, you never know who might be the next Sarah Mills." The competition began with preliminary rounds. Sarah performed consistently, qualifying easily for the advanced stages. The crosswinds were as challenging as ever, but now she approached them with confidence rather than anxiety. Between rounds, she noticed whispered conversations and pointed fingers. Her reputation had preceded her. Some competitors watched her technique closely, others maintained a respectful distance. Diana appeared beside her during lunch. "They're all wondering if you'll put on the blindfold again." Sarah laughed. "Lightning doesn't strike twice." "No, but legends grow," Diana countered. "Sometimes the story matters more than the shot." As the final round approached, the announcer called competitors to their stations. The maximum distance challenge, now officially named the Mills Challenge in her honor, would conclude the event. Sarah settled into position, focusing on the distant target. The familiar Devil's Crosswind whipped across the range, flags snapping in conflicting directions. No blindfold this time, just skill, discipline, and the lessons learned over months of practice. The horn sounded. 3 minutes on the clock. She took her time, reading the wind patterns, making minute adjustments. When she finally squeezed the trigger, the shot felt perfect, a culmination of everything she'd learned since that first day behind the registration table. The spotter's flag confirmed a clean hit. Not a perfect bullseye, but impressive, given the conditions. As she stood, a soft applause spread through the range. Not for a miracle shot this time, but for consistent excellence and the quiet dignity with which she'd returned to the place where she was once dismissed. In that moment, Sarah realized that her journey wasn't about capturing lightning in a bottle again. It was about steady growth, about opening doors for others, and about transforming an underdog moment into a lasting legacy. Full circle. 1 year. After her blindfolded shot, Sarah found herself back at Ridgewood Range, not as a competitor, but as head instructor for their new Fundamentals program. The irony wasn't lost on her. The volunteer once told to stick to water cups now taught others how to master the Devil's Crosswind. The range had changed. New signage welcomed beginners. Equipment loans were available for those without expensive gear. Even the registration area had been redesigned to be more approachable. On this particular morning, Sarah arrived early to prepare for a special session, one specifically designed for those who'd never imagined themselves behind a rifle. As she arranged the classroom materials, the range owner, Thomas, stopped by. "Full house today," he remarked. "Your reputation brings them in." Sarah nodded. "How's Marcus adjusting to his new role?" Marcus had recently accepted a position as the Range's Advanced Techniques instructor. An unlikely partnership had formed between them. She handled newcomers, he polished the skills of those ready for competition. "Still as technically minded as ever," Thomas chuckled. "But he's learning to be patient. Vincent's been helping too. Turns out he's got a knack for spotting." The door opened and participants began filing in. Sarah recognized the familiar mixture of excitement and apprehension on their faces, the same emotions she'd felt standing at that firing line with a blindfold in her hands. Franklin slipped in quietly, taking a seat at the back. Now, semi-retired, he still came to observe and occasionally offer wisdom. Their eyes met, and he gave her a subtle thumbs up. "Welcome to Fundamentals," Sarah began once everyone was seated. "Before we start, I want to share something with you." She held up a simple plastic hair clip, identical to the one she'd worn that fateful day. "This reminds me that skill doesn't always look like what we expect. Some of you might be thinking, you don't belong here. That shooting is for people with expensive equipment or military backgrounds." She paused, scanning the room. 1 year ago, I was told to stay behind the safety line, to stick to handing out water cups, that this sport wasn't for people like me. Several participants nodded in recognition. What I learned is that excellence doesn't care about appearances. It cares about dedication, about feeling the wind, rather than just calculating it, about trusting your instincts when everything and everyone tells you you're wrong. From the back, Franklin called out, "Tell them about the blindfold." Laughter rippled through the room. "That's a story for after you've mastered the basics," Sarah replied with a smile. "First, let's talk about breath control." As the day progressed, Sarah moved among the participants, offering gentle corrections and encouragement. Some showed natural talent, others struggled with fundamentals, all received the same patient guidance. During the lunch break, a young woman approached hesitantly. "I almost didn't come today," she admitted. "I was afraid of looking foolish." "The only foolish thing," Sarah replied, "is letting fear stop you from discovering what you're capable of." Later, as participants practiced at the shorter-range targets, Sarah stood beside Franklin, watching their progress. "You've built something remarkable here," he observed. "Not just teaching technique, but changing the culture." Sarah nodded. "It wasn't just about that one shot." "No," Franklin agreed. "It was about the 3 minutes you took to prove them wrong. And everything you've done with those minutes since." As afternoon faded into evening, Sarah gathered the group for final remarks. Behind them, the sunset painted Ridgewood Range in, golden hues, the infamous crosswind finally settling into a gentle breeze. "Remember," she concluded, "the target isn't just the bullseye, it's becoming the person who knows their own capability, regardless of what others might say." After everyone had gone, Sarah lingered at the range where her blindfolded shot had changed everything. She closed her eyes, feeling the evening breeze against her skin, remembering the darkness of the blindfold and the moment of perfect clarity that followed. She opened her eyes to find Marcus approaching, rifle case in hand. "Ready for tomorrow's advanced class?" he asked. "Always," she replied. As they walked toward the parking lot, Marcus chuckled. "You know, I still get asked about it. The blindfolded shot. What do you tell them?" "I tell them it was the day I learned. That sometimes you have to close your eyes to truly see." Sarah smiled. In 3 minutes, she had changed her life's trajectory. But it was what she'd done with every minute since that truly mattered, helping others find their own moment of clarity, their own opportunity to step forward when the world tells them to stay behind the line. She glanced back at Ridgewood Range one last time before getting into her car. The place where she'd once been dismissed was now where she helped others find their voice. The journey had come full circle, and yet it felt like only the beginning. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and become a part of our Everyday Life Stories community. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. We love hearing from our amazing viewers around the world.